It's 7 p.m. Friday, May 10th here in Seoul.
Coming up on NEWSCENTER tonight. The Pentagon claims the projectiles North Korea launched yesterday were ballistic missiles, which would violate UN resolutions. South Korea, meanwhile, says more analysis is needed.
Washington's point man for North Korea, Biegun, says the door remains open for Pyongyang to return to nuclear talks despite yesterday's weapons test.
South Korea says it'll continue to seek food aid to North Korea. It will, however, listen to public opinion first.
The U.S. slaps new tariffs on Chinese imports, prompting an angry response from Beijing. However, both sides are optimistic a trade deal can be reached after their ongoing trade talks. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Good evening to our viewers in Asia and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Arirang News Center. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Han-daeun.
And I'm Noadam. Thank you, as always, for joining us this evening. Only one place to start, really, and more details are coming out on yesterday's weapons test by North Korea, and the Pentagon has confirmed that the projectiles fired were ballistic missiles.
Seoul's defense ministry, however, is being more cautious, saying further analysis is needed. Our Kim Ji-yeon leading us off at the defense ministry.
In a statement released by Pentagon spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Dave Eastburn on Thursday, the U.S. Defense Department confirmed that North Korea had launched multiple ballistic missiles from its northwestern location and that the missiles flew more than 300 kilometers before landing in the East Sea. Seoul's defense ministry, on the other hand, is taking a more cautious stance, saying on Friday that it's still confirming the Pentagon's, quote, unofficial statement on whether they're ballistic missiles, reiterating that it currently sees them as short-range missiles. The missile firing was a first by the North since November 2017, when the regime test-fired the Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missile. A defense ministry official confirmed 240mm multiple rocket launchers were also fired on Thursday in another location and direction when compared to the two short-range missiles launched from Kusong, Pyeongan-bukdo province. The main consensus among local experts is that it's nearly certain that the missiles were in fact ballistic.
Thursday's firing is similar to Russia's Iskander ballistic missiles, and it's short-range because it's less than 1,000 kilometers. Looking at the trajectory and flying altitude of the missile, it's a ballistic and not a cruise missile.
The Iskander ballistic missile is able to move away from its original flight arc to change its target or avoid being shot down by anti-missile systems. The experts said the discrepancy between the U.S. and South Korea in their assessment of the firing may come from diplomatic reasons rather than military analyses, adding that Seoul's defense ministry may strategically be avoiding the word ballistic to keep the conciliatory momentum so that Pyongyang could engage in dialogue for denuclearization. But if it's further confirmed that the North had fired ballistic missiles, it would make it official that the North had violated United Nations Security Council resolutions that ban such testing. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Intelligence Service rolled out its analysis so far, in which it said Thursday's projectiles fired by North Korea could be a new type of weapon system. The agency said for that reason, the South Korean government's conclusion on what type of missiles they were is being delayed. It also analyzed that North Korea's firing on Thursday was part of a self-defense military drill, but was a clear violation of the inter-Korean military agreement signed last September. It also agreed with the presidential office's assessment that the Pentagon statement classifying the projectiles as ballistic missiles does not appear to be the official stance of the U.S. government. Soon after North Korea launched those projectiles yesterday, South Korean President Moon Jaein warned the regime that missile launches could jeopardize dialogue and could be a violation of UN Security Council regulations. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Topping the agenda for President Moon Jae-in's first TV interview with a local broadcaster, North Korea's apparent missile launch on Thursday, an escalation from the regime's previous weapons test 5 days earlier. He said Seoul and Washington believe the North fired what appear to be short-range missiles. The president added it might constitute a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, which prohibits the regime from using ballistic missile technology. And the South Korean leader had a clear warning to North Korea after an eventful few days of military activity.
북한의 이런 행위가 거듭된다면 지금 대화와 협상 국면을 어렵게 만들 수 있다라는 점을 북한 측에 경고를 하고 싶습니다.
President Moon also said the launches were the North's way of showing its discontent that the second North Korea-U.S. summit in February ended with no deal.
북한은 계획된 그런 행동으로 일단 보입니다. 북한 측에서도 한편으로 자기 의사를 표현하면서 한편으로는 판이 깨어지지 않도록 아주 유의를 하고 있는 것으로 그렇게 판단이 됩니다.
On the issue of sending humanitarian food aid to North Korea, the president floated the idea of sending rice to the north, saying South Korea has a huge amount of rice just sitting in stockpiles. And for that, he urged South Korea's political parties to strike an agreement and stand behind the plan.
이 점에 대해서는 국민들의 공감이나 지지도 필요하다고 생각합니다. 또 여야 정치권 사이에 좀 충분한 논의도 필요하다고 생각하고요. 그래서 차제에 대통령과 여야 이런 대표들의 그 회동이 이루어지면 좋겠다라는 생각을 하는 것입니다.
The president also repeatedly stressed that his administration's plan to send food aid to North Korea had been fully supported by U.S. President Donald Trump. Reminiscing on that moment when the leaders of the two Koreas held that private conversation on the blue-painted footbridge at the border village of Panmunjom last year, President Moon added that it plans to actively engage the North for another summit meeting in the near future, something that could serve as the catalyst to breaking this current impasse on the nuclear negotiations. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
President Trump, meanwhile, apparently sees North Korea's actions yesterday as unhelpful. Nobody's happy about the launches, he says, and the U.S. is looking at the situation very seriously. Kan Young-woo with more on Trump's reaction.
President Trump says the U.S. is closely looking at North Korea's latest firing of projectiles into the East Sea on Thursday, calling them short-range missiles.
Well, we're looking at it very seriously right now. They were smaller missiles, short-range missiles. Nobody's happy about it, but we're taking a good look, and we'll see. We'll see. The relationship continues, but we'll see what happens. I know they want to negotiate. They're talking about negotiating, but I don't think they're ready to negotiate.
Although President Trump expressed his unpleasant feelings towards North Korea's military activity, he added Pyongyang has great economic potential, and he doesn't think Kim Jong-un is going to miss the opportunity to strengthen his regime's economy. Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Force conducted a launching test of an unarmed intercontinental ballistic missile on the same day that North Korea fired its two projectiles. Having conducted a similar launch earlier this month, the Air Force said the test verified the accuracy of the system and demonstrate nuclear deterrent capability, but are not a reaction to world events. The Air Force added the launch was part of regularly scheduled tests of ICBMs to ensure their combat readiness. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
Now to the response from Korean politicians on North Korea's latest firings. Rival parties are giving out mixed assessments and suggesting contrasting countermeasures. The main opposition party criticized Pyongyang's move, calling for a change in Seoul's North Korea policies, while the ruling party said that the peace momentum should not be broken. Our Kim Mo-gun for us tonight.
The ruling Democratic Party has expressed regret over North Korea's recent firings. Speaking at the National Assembly on Friday, ruling party floor leader Lee In-young urged Pyongyang to stop such provocations and return to the negotiating table. But despite the latest developments, he stressed humanitarian assistance to North Korea should be provided immediately.
The past conservative governments also agreed on the need for humanitarian assistance to the north. Aiding the North Korean people is a separate issue from the latest missile tests, and we should actively proceed with it.
Meanwhile, the main opposition Liberty Korea party said that North Korea's latest actions reflect its true colors. It stressed that the government needs to take a hardline approach, such as maintaining stern sanctions against Pyongyang and the annulment of the inter-Korean military agreement.
Our policy on North Korea was a Pyongyang-first policy rather than a Seoul-first policy. It's about time to shift such policy to one that centers on the nation's interests.
The leader of the centrist Bareunmirae party also criticized Pyongyang, calling for the North to settle the diplomatic issue through a more mature way, such as dialogue. As for the minor opposition parties, the Party for Democracy and Peace and the Justice Party expressed concern, highlighting that the North's recent actions will not be of any help for the regime's survival or its economy. They both called on Pyongyang not to undo the past year of inter-Korean efforts for peace. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korean state media has said regime leader Kim Jong-un supervised yesterday's firing on the west coast. The KCNA said Kim overlooked the training plan of what it called multiple long-range hitting weapons and ordered the launch. However, terms such as missile or rocket were not mentioned. It added the military training was carried out to test the rapid response capability of the troops stationed on the Western Front. Kim also reportedly emphasized the importance of maintaining battle readiness and developing the regime's military capabilities. South Korea says it will still go ahead with plans to give food aid to the north despite the regime's latest weapons test, but Seoul adds it will take public opinion into account before making a final decision. Jong-un has more.
South Korea's plan to give food aid to North Korea is still on, despite the North's firing of short-range missiles Thursday, the second such incident in less than a week. On Friday, Seoul's Unification Ministry announced
North Korea faces a very serious food situation. There is no change in our stance that there needs to be food aid to the North in a humanitarian and fraternal move.
The ministry added that it needs support from the South Korean people and will work to collect public opinion. Seoul officially announced on Wednesday that it'll provide humanitarian food assistance to Pyongyang through close coordination with the international community. With support from the U.S., talk of food aid to the North gained traction, even going as far as covering whether South Korea will offer direct assistance or go through the UN. But with the North firing 2 short-range missiles on Thursday, views are divided on whether Seoul should go ahead with the plan. Meeting with the Unification Minister Kim Yeon-chul on Friday, the head of Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, Representative Yoon Sang-hyun, voiced concerns that the government should be prudent about the timing of the food aid. Stressing that humanitarian assistance shouldn't look like a reward for or submission to the North's missile launch, Yoon urged the government to first form a consensus with the public and the international community. Seoul's Unification Minister agreed that social consensus is crucial in providing assistance to the North. The Unification Ministry says it'll collect opinions from the public, taking into account changes on the Korean Peninsula. Jong-un, Arirang News.
Washington's top nuclear envoy has expressed hopes of continuing talks with North Korea despite yesterday's weapons test. Stephen Biegun is in Seoul meeting top officials. Our Foreign Ministry correspondent Lee Ji-won reports.
Despite North Korea's recent provocative actions, the door to dialogue is still open, according to Washington's Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun. He was quoted by Seoul's foreign ministry as saying so during his 25-minute closed-door meeting with Minister Kang Kyung-hwa Friday morning. Minister Kang said the North's most recent launches do not help alleviate military tension on the Korean peninsula and called them very concerning. She added that serious talks are needed between Seoul, Pyongyang, and Washington in order to achieve complete denuclearization and permanent peace on the peninsula. Biegun reportedly agreed with that and reiterated the importance of their alliance at a time like this. After a sit-down with the minister, Biegun met with his South Korean counterpart Lee Do-hun, Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs. The two reportedly had an in-depth discussion of how to respond to the North's missile launches.
The two nuclear negotiators also hosted their working group meeting. This time, it was rather a big delegation from Washington, including the U.S. mission to the UN and officials from the Departments of Defense and Treasury. While no details were given on the agenda, the Foreign Ministry says the two sides share their assessments on the recent situation and an in-depth discussion of the various ways they can cooperate to achieve their shared goal of denuclearization and peace. While no details were given on the agenda, the Foreign Ministry says the two sides share their assessments on the recent situation and an in-depth discussion of the various ways they can cooperate to achieve their shared goal of denuclearization and peace. South Korea's plans to give humanitarian food aid to the North was one likely topic for Friday's meeting. And despite the recent increase in tension due to the North's missile launches, a source confirmed that the food aid had in fact been brought up during their talks. However, Thursday's missile launches seem to have put Biegun's guard up. He was supposed to field questions from reporters during his way out of the ministry, but the plan was scrapped at the request of the U.S. side. Biegun also met with other top officials in Seoul in the afternoon, including the Unification Minister Kim Yeon-chol and Kim Yeon-jong, Second Deputy Chief of National Security Office. 이지원, Arirang News.
The United States has seized a North Korean cargo vessel for allegedly violating U.S. and UN sanctions by illegally shipping coal from the north. The U.S. Justice Department says the Wise Honest is one of the regime's largest bulk carriers and was also used to deliver heavy machinery to North Korea. It marks the first time the U.S. has seized a North Korean cargo vessel for violating sanctions. The ship was previously detained by Indonesia last year when it was caught transporting over 25,000 tons of coal. Meanwhile, Washington has called on Pyongyang to get rid of its political prison camps, which the UN estimates hold 120,000 people in dreadful conditions. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
Speaking to the United Nations Human Rights Council on Thursday, during a 5-year review of North Korea's human rights record, senior U.S. diplomat Mark Hasir urged the regime to dismantle its political prison camps, estimated to be holding tens of thousands of political prisoners.
We recommend that North Korea, first, immediately dismantle all political prison camps, release all political prisoners, institute protections against arbitrary detention that guarantee due process and fair trial, and grant international observers, including UN special procedures, unimpeded and unrestricted access to the country and to all detention facilities. 2, allow humanitarian assistance providers operating in North Korea unrestricted and independent movement throughout the country, as well as direct and unimpeded access to all populations in need.
UN rights investigators estimate between 80 to 120,000 political prisoners are being held captive in harsh detention camps in North Korea, where torture and other violations are taking place that they say may amount to crimes against humanity. However, North Korea denies the allegations, saying people's rights are fully ensured in the communist state.
In the DPRK, where the human beings are held most dear, the people's right to life and fundamental freedoms are fully ensured. A robust and elaborate complaints machinery is put in place, and the human rights violations in whatever forms are intolerable.
The North Korean diplomat added that some countries are joining the UN Security Council to impose unilateral sanctions on the North, saying such sanctions against the regime hamper North Korea's efforts for the protection and promotion of human rights. This comes a day after Tommaso Heya Quintana, the U.S. Special Rapporteur on North Korea's human rights, called on countries to challenge Pyongyang over the prison camps, adding it's a rare opportunity for them to directly engage with the North on human rights issues. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Turning to some domestic news now, and President Moon Jaein has said things will slowly but surely turn around for the local economy, noting positive trends in employment. His optimism came after yesterday's live TV interview to mark 2 years in office. Park Hee-jun reports.
President Moon Jae-in forecasts the South Korean economy will achieve an over 2% growth rate in the latter half of the year.
다행스럽게도 그 분기의 마지막인 3월에는 그 이제 저성장의 원인이었던 이렇게 수출 부진 또 투자 부진 이런 부분들이 서서히 이제 회복 되고 있고 지금 좋아지는 추세입니다. 하반기에는 우리의 이제 잠재 성장률에 해당하는 2% 중후반 수준을 회복할 것이다. 그렇게 지금 전망하고 있고 또 기대를 하고 있습니다.
President Moon said economic growth is an area of concern, and his goal is to pull the number up to 2.5 to 2.6% from the minus 0.3% recorded in the first quarter of this year. He also expects better news on the employment front. Although the number of newly employed in South Korea dropped below 100,000 in the past year, the president said he expects that number to double to 200,000 this year. As for ways to boost the economy, the president emphasized the need to find new growth engines and to foster innovative growth.
그래서 새로운 어떤 산업을 통한 새로운 성장 동력을 마련하는 것이 시급하다고 보는 것이고요. 우선 아시다시피 가장 이제 이렇게 시급하게 중심적인 그 영향을 쏟아부을 부분은 시스템 반도체 분야, 그다음에 바이오 헬스 분야, 그다음에 미래 자동차 분야.
He added that small and mid-sized companies in South Korea are already excelling in these areas. Especially for future cars, the president says local SMEs are showing great progress exporting compact cars and electric cars. The president says that should create additional jobs and lead the country into the fourth industrial revolution. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, as of Friday, U.S. time, new U.S. tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods took effect, even as negotiators from the two sides meet in Washington. China says it regrets the decision by President Trump and says it will respond. Kim Hye-sung has more.
U.S. tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports have been increased from 10% to 25% starting Friday Washington time, just as President Trump threatened to do so last weekend after accusing China of backtracking on commitments made in its draft trade deal. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection says the new 25% duty on around 5,700 import items ranging from auto parts to clothes will not affect U.S.-bound goods that had already left Chinese ports and airports before midnight. China's Commerce Ministry said it deeply regrets the U.S. decision Friday, adding that it would take necessary countermeasures without elaborating. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Geng Shuang also called on the U.S. to meet halfway to help ensure stable relations between the two countries. The tariff hike came even after top U.S. and Chinese negotiators began additional talks in Washington. The Chinese delegation led by Vice Premier Liu He sat down with U.S. officials including Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin for around 90 minutes Thursday in Washington. Already, the U.S. and China have exchanged tariffs on over $360 billion worth of goods since last year. High-level trade talks between the two have been going on for months, with Washington calling on Beijing to make changes to its trade and regulatory practices, including protection over U.S. intellectual property and increased market access to China. Bloomberg Economics estimates the new 25% increase on Chinese imports will raise the drag on Chinese growth to 0.9% from 0.5%, while the IMF estimates the negative impact on the U.S. growth at 0.2% and potentially more if there's a blow to markets and confidence. Amid growing uncertainties over the trade row, the U.S. and China will resume talks on Friday in Washington. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Now, the uncertainty surrounding the U.S.-China trade talks is affecting not only global but local financial markets. Korea's main stock index has seen major fluctuations during those talks, and the results, or lack thereof, could deal a major blow to Korea's exports as well as the value of the local currency. Our Kim Dami with the details.
Korea's main stock index, the Kospi, dipped below the 2100 mark for the first time in 4 months because of the latest snag in the U.S.-China trade talks. On Friday morning, Seoul stocks opened higher on hopes for a positive result from the talks in Washington. But as it became clear there was no deal, those gains evaporated. The $1-2 exchange rate in midday trading rose to over 1,180. This was the highest in 2 years and 4 months. With investors anxious, South Korea's central bank held an emergency meeting Friday morning to evaluate the impact of the trade tensions on the country's financial markets. The BOK chief said the bank will closely monitor the U.S.-China situation and help stabilize the markets through close cooperation with the government. Some impact on the country's exports is also inevitable. Hyundai Research Institute says when U.S. tariffs on $500 billion of Chinese goods rise from 10% to 25%, Korea's shipments to China will decrease by $26 billion. Bad news for exports already in a slump. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said it will strengthen its monitoring of exports by item and industry and do everything it can to grow them, especially in consumer goods and digital trade. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
South Korea's tax revenues in the first quarter fell to $66 billion, a decline of $680 million. The finance ministry attributed the fall to lower revenue from value-added tax, which dropped by around $760 million. Transport tax revenue also fell by $340 million on lower fuel taxes. Compared to the goal for the year, the government has collected 26.4% of it, a decline from the same time last year of around 3 percentage points. Today, May 10th, is Single-Parents' Day in South Korea, a day set aside to promote awareness of single-parent families. Although the day was designated last year, today marks the first time for Single-Parents' Day to be celebrated. Our Choi Si-young has the story.
With all families was the slogan at the first celebration of Single-Parents' Day. At the event, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family recognized the achievements of those who help raise awareness and build an inclusive society that does not discriminate against single parents.
With prejudice and discrimination behind us, I hope that our society treats all families with respect and understanding and ushers in a culture where all families live equally.
The ministry said it hopes to encourage more people to embrace single-parent families, with Single-Parents' Day to be celebrated annually from this year. Designating May 10th as Single-Parents' Day is one thing, but single-parents say they need more wide-ranging measures and support from the government and the public.
Single parents and their children still face discrimination. Every child is the same whether they're from a single parent or not. We need to not discriminate against them based on their parents.
A survey conducted last year by the Family Ministry on 2,500 single parents showed the majority of them felt discriminated against in their neighborhoods and at their children's school. The government alone cannot eradicate discrimination against single-parent families and hopes that by celebrating Single-Parents' Day annually, the public can change their outlooks. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
There are always ups and downs in diplomatic relations between South Korea and Japan, but in terms of culture, fruitful exchanges between the two have been ongoing for decades. Arirang's Won Jung-hwan is in Tokyo to see firsthand how the two neighboring nations' cultural exchanges are continuing.
I'm here at the Korean Cultural Center in Tokyo, the city, where the first Korea's Overseas Cultural Center opened 40 years ago. And to commemorate 4 decades of active cultural exchanges, the center is holding various events and special exhibitions. With the ribbon-cutting ceremony that celebrates the 40th birthday of the center, the Korean Cultural Center in Tokyo launched a special exhibition on Thursday evening focusing on Korean traditional handicrafts presented by 23 Korean craft masters. The 75 pieces created by highly acclaimed masters including Kim Gi-ho, the holder of the country's intangible cultural property, will showcase their handworks to Tokyo residents from Friday to June 11th. Scores of government officials and artists from both countries who attended the exhibition's opening ceremony were amazed by the Korean-made art. And among them, Japan's head of Cultural Affairs said he could feel how deeply the two countries share their cultural beauty.
40 years has been emphasized, but I believe that in terms of sharing beautiful culture between South Korea and Japan, it goes way back. Today, I was dazzled seeing an exhibition of this ultimate beauty.
A special music performance also artfully mingles the traditional musical instruments of both South Korea and Japan, symbolizing the two countries' interlocked cultural relations. And with these kind of showcases, the oldest overseas Korean cultural center hopes to expand Korean culture to an even bigger audience in Japan.
The center will always be a platform to gather those who are interested in the Korean wave or the international phenomenon of Korean pop culture. When they visit, we also plan to introduce more Korean cultures so they can naturally expand their love for the Korean wave to Korean culture in general.
Indeed, while K-pop fever continues to grip Japan, the center will continue to help raise Japanese people's understanding of Korean culture by introducing them to the essence of highbrow Korean culture right in the heart of Japan. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스, 도쿄.
The presidential office, government and ruling Democratic Party have agreed to boost their cooperation on drawing up policies aimed at improving people's livelihoods. Representatives from the three sides met today to assess the progress on the Moon administration's pledges in 5 sectors, mainly those related to labour, public enterprises and franchises. They said they'll make on-site visits to come up with more effective, detailed policies for the people. DP floor leader Lee In-young said Parliament should swiftly work to achieve those goals. Lotte Chemical has opened an ethylene plant in Lake Charles, Louisiana, becoming the first South Korean firm to construct and operate a large-scale petrochemical facility in the United States. The firm says the joint venture with Westlake Chemical can produce 1 million tons of ethylene annually and will start operations this month. Ethylene is an essential chemical for producing plastic and fibers. South Korean Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun was at Thursday's opening ceremony and said the plant will create over 2,500 jobs, as well as boost energy cooperation between the two countries. The U.S. Treasury Department is reportedly planning to take South Korea off its currency manipulation watch list. Bloomberg also reported Thursday that 8 more countries will be added to the list, bringing the total to 20. South Korea's Trade Ministry plans to supply over 6,000 hydrogen vehicles this year, which is 7 times higher than last year's figure. The move is part of Seoul's efforts to promote greener cars. As well as hydrogen-powered passenger cars, the ministry plans to supply hydrogen-powered taxis and buses in the coming months. That has been your 3-minute news flash.
It's nice to end the work week with pleasant weather.
Yes, but unfortunately, the fine dust levels are increasing. For the latest weather forecast, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Centre. Michelle, what's the latest?
TGIF, guys, but I wish the air quality was better. Unfortunately, the capital and Busan are already seeing high concentrations of fine dust. Now, this is expected to spread across the eastern provinces by tomorrow, so stay updated on the air quality index. The nation will stay clear and sunny all throughout Saturday with high UV levels, so don't forget your sunblock. Meanwhile, Beijing will have summer-like temperatures with highs back up into their 30s. The morning temperatures are warmer than the seasonal average, so morning will kick off to 14 degrees Celsius with similar conditions across the peninsula. Tomorrow will be a few degrees hotter, so it will reach up to 27 degrees Celsius now, while regions such as Chuncheon and Daegu and Gyeongju will get all the way up to 29 degrees. The dry conditions are expected to continue or even intensify over the weekend, but temperatures will cool down early next week, so until then, stay cool. I'll leave you with weather conditions around the world.
Well, that will do it for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
Stay tuned to Arirang for more analysis on current issues on News in Depth coming up next.